I'm aware I'm pretty late on this one. Hey, I was too busy watching all of Doctor Who to get around to it. Then I was busy with my job, so I still couldn't watch it. However, last month, I finally did. I majorly loved the first series. I thought it was absolutely excellent in almost every way. I heard mixed things about Bly Manor, though. That also was one of the reasons why it wasn't the top of my list either. But with all of that, I thought it was good. To make it as brief as possible, to get to the real meat and potatoes, I thought the performances were excellent, although Pedretti struggled at certain points. The story in regards to Dani and what was happening in the present was also very well done, as well as the cinematography and tone. Problem is the filler. While I feel like Hill House managed to utilize its 10-episode running time, Bly Manor struggled. I feel as though this could have been 4 to 5 episodes and it would have been a lot better. The thing is, I wouldn't have minded if the filler was good, but it wasn't. The only time that it was good was the Miss Gross episode, which received universal acclaim for obvious reasons, as well as the penultimate episode. But the latter was because it felt like it was as close to the original adaptation of The Innocents as it could get. Victorian era, black and white, creepy as hell. Very well executed. However, almost everything else in regards to the filler was an absolute slog, and by that, I mean the Peter Quint and Miss Jessel storyline, as well as the stuff with the uncle. Didn't really care about any of that, and I just wanted to get back to the main storyline. Plus, it did also take away from the mystery of the original story, and why Quint and Jessel's relationship was so intriguing. It wasn't a bad miniseries, but it did have a lot wrong with it that prevents it from being better. With this, we will get into something that really irked me while watching. Rewind back to the original story, as well as its most popular adaptation, The Innocents. Now, I'm not comparing the two, because that would be incredibly unfair. However, one of the best things about the movie, I cannot comment on the novella as I have not read it, is its use of Miss Giddens being an unreliable narrator. We don't know if there are actually ghosts, or if it's all in her head because of her own sexual repression due to Victorian conservatism and leeching off of that Christian punishment of sexual ideas. There is a hefty emphasis on that whole theme, with the first major thing in the film we see is Miss Giddens' hands together in the middle of prayer. The whole core of the film is the sexual repression of our main character. Now, in The Haunting of Bly Manor, due to the fact that Mike Flanagan ditched the idea of the unreliable narrator to evolve the story in his own way, with there actually being ghosts, and no doubt in that idea. That needed to change. How do you evolve Christian prudes and their repression of sex in the 1800s to the more contemporary era of the 1980s? Make the main character a lesbian. I thought this was absolutely fucking perfect. When the character of Jamie first appears in the show in, I believe, the first or second episode, I immediately knew where it was going to go. Or at least I thought. Because if it went where I thought it was going to go, I wouldn't be making a video right now. Or at least the video might be slightly different. The treatment of Dani's character in this was so completely and utterly mishandled in regards to her sexual orientation, I was very livid. You have this perfectly gift-wrapped theme and arc that you could have done in your show that would have perfectly paralleled the story it is based on, and they barely went anywhere with it. It's like the team behind the miniseries unfurled the bow, took off the wrapping paper, and then just didn't open it. Now, there is the possibility that Mike Flanagan didn't want to portray the repression of homosexuals in this show because it might have been seen as controversial. But I feel as though you could have interwoven it into the story in a way to make it purely because of the societal feelings at the time and not one's general feelings about gay people. Eventually, in the show, we do get Dani's backstory episode, which wasn't great, not as bad as the Quint Jessel stuff, but not as good as the Gross episode or the penultimate episode. In this episode, it's revealed that she had a fiancé who was a childhood friend that she agreed to marry purely because he wouldn't take no for an answer, which is a discussion for a whole other time. She reveals to him that she is in fact a lesbian, and he's more pissed that they did all this work for the wedding for nothing, rather than the fact that she's a lesbian. And then he gets hit by a van. I wish in that interaction in the car that there was more of an animosity of her sexual orientation than just, oh, we spent all this money on shit. but in a way that was purely for the ideas of the time rather than the general idea, as I stated. You had this show take place in the 1980s at the height of the AIDS epidemic. How in the fuck did you not take advantage of that? Then, when Dani is seeing the figure in the mirror towards the beginning of the miniseries, it might not just be her fiancé, but a representation of society's repression of homosexuals by being maybe her mom, or a neighbor, or a priest, or just a random person telling her that she's a mistake or she's not supposed to feel this way. And have her apprehensiveness to have a happy life with Jamie to be her own repression, ding ding ding, and her denial of who she is rather than, oh, my fiancé is dead, and then burning his glasses magically fixes everything. Then having the reason she actually does decide to be with Jamie at the end of the series is because she is one with the Lady of the Lake and doesn't know how much time she has left and wants those final years to be happy and be who she really is. I think that would have been a much better and more interesting arc than just dealing with the death of her fiancé. Because the way it was portrayed in the show, it feels almost like an afterthought, which I don't want to believe since Mike Flanagan is such an exceptional filmmaker. But upon reading some IMDb trivia, I think it kinda was. See, originally, the character of Jamie was slated to be played by Oliver Jackson Cohen, which Flanagan changed since he and Victoria Pedretti, who played Dani, played twins in Hill House, and thought that would be weird. I feel as though Flanagan made little change to Jamie's character, and through that, Amelia Eve, who played Jamie, had to step up and make the character not only hers, but a character that would be memorable and important to the overall narrative and story, especially in regards to Dani's character. Proof being that Eve made the character's backstory in regards to her taking care of her siblings when she was young, and giving the character a last name. Side note, Amelia Eve is definitely an underrated talent in this series, and in my opinion, gave the best performance through the entire series. While Tania Miller got all the love, and rightfully so because she was exceptional as well, Eve definitely did such a fantastic job in the role, and made the character work so much better than it could have been. But that is beside the point, but I tend to get off track easily. Now, I don't know the inner workings of the show, and at this point I can only guess why this arc ended up the way that it did. Most likely is one of the two reasons that kind of leech off each other. The first being that if Mike Flanagan showcased the repression of homosexuals, people would have gotten upset, which is understandable because it is a dodgy topic to talk about. The second is that Flanagan didn't see what it could have offered and decided only to make it a small subplot and wanted to purely focus on the world building and story of Bly, which is disappointing if that's true. Despite everything though, it's a decent miniseries, even if it didn't go as far as it should have been in regards to this small subplot in The Haunting of Bly Manor. It still offered a genuinely interesting story, some great performances, and one can only hope and pray that Amelia Eve gets genuinely good work because of this, and a good balanced tone. I just do very much wish that in regards to Dani's sexual orientation, that it did go further and gave us a better arc, and made Dani a more three-dimensional character.